Wait, Mary, it's me. My ex-husband and my son's wife eloped 10 years ago, and they have been missing ever since. I didn't want to think about them, let alone see them, but for the first time in 10 years, he contacted me. My ex-husband called me and demanded, "I'm going to live at your parents' house now. You still live with your parents, don't you? I apologize for contacting you like this, but you need to leave my house." I was taken aback by his request. We hadn't spoken in 10 years, and I had no idea what he wanted. But he was asking for my parents' house to live in with his unfaithful partner. "I see you're still living with your parents, but have you remarried yet?" he asked. "Get out of there as soon as possible." For the first time in 10 years, I became enraged at my ex-husband, who was mocking me even more. Fortunately, he was unaware that my living situation had changed over the previous 10 years. "I'm sorry, but if it's my parents' house, it's gone," I said. "Huh?" I reminded him this for the first time in 10 years. I was determined to succeed. Mary Kane is my name. I am 60 years old and work as a part-time teacher in a private school. Even though I have reached retirement age, I continue to work part-time, albeit with a lower annual salary. Perhaps it was because of my childhood memories that I admired my parents, who were well-known teachers, and I grew up aspiring to be like them. I had a husband, Stephen, but we divorced 10 years ago. And now, after 10 long years, that man, whom I thought I'd never see again after such a bad breakup, unexpectedly called. I met Stephen in college when I was 21 years old. I was working part-time as a teacher at a tutoring center while also studying to be a teacher. Stephen was a new part-time teacher who had recently joined the center. He was older than me, but I had been there longer, so the director asked me to train him. As I trained him, we became good friends and eventually began a relationship. We married after 3 years of dating and had a son, Michael. After graduation, I found a full-time teaching job and left the tutoring center. Our life together was just beginning. After 25 years, Michael married Sarah, whom he'd met at a design school in New York. We congratulated Michael on his marriage and spent our days hoping that they would build a happy family together. Then, Michael unexpectedly returned home and wanted to confide in me. He had been working as a prototype designer, specializing in figurines, and hadn't been home in a long time. But it seemed that something was bothering him. "You know, Mom, you're married to Dad, aren't you?" he asked. "Yes." I was thrilled to see him, but began to worry. "I saw Dad walking around Brooklyn with Sarah the other day," he explained. "Okay." Apparently, he saw Sarah walking arm in arm with Stephen last Friday night, and in Brooklyn's hotel district. Michael was on his way home from work when he saw them and became suspicious. He followed them and saw them walk into the hotel. I couldn't believe it. Even though they are in-laws, Stephen and Sarah are as close as real father and daughter. However, meeting privately and alone was odd. And even less in a hotel? No way. I was hoping it was a misunderstanding or a bad dream, but there was evidence. The phone screen Michael showed me had a clear image of Stephen and Sarah walking into the hotel arm in arm. And speaking of Friday nights, Stephen arrived home late. He claimed it was overtime at his office, but I guess that was a complete lie. Furthermore, I remembered that Stephen had been arriving home late on an increasing number of days in the last few months. He claimed it was because of happy hour with his colleagues, an unexpected business trip, or working on a holiday. I initially believed him. However, when I considered it calmly and carefully, I realized that aside from happy hours, there had been almost no unexpected business trips, overtime work, or work on holidays up until now. I felt uneasy that these had increased lately. Was it all a ruse to spend more time with Sarah? I asked Michael to send me the image, then told him I'd talk to his father about it before sending him on his way. I waited for Stephen to get home that night. He returned late at night, smelling strongly of alcohol. The smell of alcohol upset me, but I boldly approached him and said, "Stephen, I saw Michael this afternoon. Is it true that you met with Sarah last Friday?" Yes, we briefly met, and I recall talking about it." The question had woken him up, and his eyes began to dart. Seeing my reaction, he went on to ask, "What did he say?" "He also said that he saw you and Sarah walking into a Brooklyn hotel together." I held up the picture Michael had given me as I said this. Stephen's eyes widened. He choked up, and his eyes darted even more, as if searching for an escape route. He sighed deeply, as if giving up after I was convinced that his reaction was correct. "I can't believe Michael noticed me. I was overjoyed. I guess I got carried away a little." "No way, Stephen." "Well, I guess it's pointless to make excuses now." Stephen began to confess everything. He admitted that he began dating Sarah 6 months ago after being swayed by her advances. He told me that his feelings were now primarily for her. 6 months ago, Michael and Sarah celebrated their 3rd wedding anniversary. Had Stephen and Sarah begun dating at that time? Despite my trembling surprise, Stephen continued to confess. "That is why I desire to marry Sarah. Mary, I want a divorce." I objected vehemently to the words, nearly losing my mind, but Stephen continued. "In any case, I'm divorcing. I can't do it with you any longer." The next day, he never came home. Furthermore, Stephen's belongings were missing from the house, and a completed divorce decree was on the table. Later, Stephen received a phone call from Michael, who was crying because Sarah had left the divorce papers and vanished. I assumed she had no intention of returning. I was stunned when Stephen and Sarah eloped and vanished. That was the conclusion of Stephen and I's divorce 10 years ago. After the divorce, Stephen and I sold the house we had been living in, and I moved into a new house I found near my workplace. I was depressed by myself immediately after the move, but as I busied myself with work, I realized that my emotional wounds had completely healed. I believe that because teaching was a rewarding job for me, I was able to heal my emotional wounds before I realized it. It must have been significant that I continued to devote myself to a single rewarding job, was allowed to work part-time at a school even after retirement, and spent active days not only with my colleagues, but with my students. I spent less and less time worrying about Stephen and Sarah as I continued to enjoy my teaching job and interactions with students. After 10 years, I no longer reflected on my time with Stephen. My income had dropped since becoming a part-time teacher, but it was still sufficient for me to stay at the school and be with my students who adored me like a parent. I'm also relieved to hear that Michael has thrown himself into his work with zeal, having recovered from the shock of his father's and wife's betrayal. A phone call, however, shattered any semblance of peace I had found. "Hello?" "Mary, it's Stephen here." "Stephen?" It was the first time in 10 years I had heard my ex-husband's voice. I thought I'd never hear it again, but when I did, I couldn't help but scream. "What do you want right now? You didn't come here to talk about the good old days, did you?" Unintentionally, my words came out stronger than I expected, but that was completely understandable. I hadn't spoken to Stephen in 10 years, and no matter how hard I tried, he is the one who insisted on the divorce. Stephen, who had somehow managed to keep his emotions under control and maintain a sense of normalcy, remembered this and said to me, Hey, what do you want from me? Why did you contact me? You are the reason we are divorced. I no longer consider you my husband, and I don't want to see you or even hear your voice." "Okay, now let me get to the point. You're back at home, aren't you? I'm sorry to interrupt you in this manner, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I couldn't control my emotions and had to raise my voice again, grasping the meaning of the words said insensitively and lightheartedly. Stephen kept talking, oblivious to the fact that I was confused and trembling with rage. "Sarah is having a baby," he continued, "but having a child is more expensive than I anticipated. Making a living is becoming increasingly difficult." According to Stephen's story, despite their 30-year age difference, they had been a passionate couple. However, Sarah became pregnant last year, which changed everything. Stephen and Sarah both quit their jobs prior to their elopement, and no decent company would hire them if they tried to find new work. They had to work part-time jobs to make ends meet, and they had been living day by day. Sarah was unable to work after becoming pregnant and giving birth, putting the family's finances in jeopardy. I couldn't take care of her any longer, so we discussed turning to Michael or my parents for help. But Michael refused to see me, and my parents disowned me. They're all so stubborn. Stephen laughed on the phone, and I saw in my mind's eye the faces of Stephen's parents and younger brother, whom I had gone to greet before their marriage 13 years before. His family consisted of a strict-looking father, a strong-willed mother, and a serious-looking younger brother. We never spoke again after the divorce, but I didn't think he was the type of man who would let Susan be unfaithful to him or to run off with his own son's wife. So, are you suggesting that I stay in our house? I said yes. The first thing you should do is make sure you have a good relationship with your wife. I'm sure your eldest daughter and the first grandchild is more important than a single woman whose only merit is being a teacher. Get the hell out of here. I felt my anger boiling over at once at his abusive tone. Had my memories of Stephen over the past 10 years been too glorified? I had not expected him to be such a lax man. And at the same time, I remembered something. I said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, but if it's my parents' house you're speaking of, it's gone." What do you mean? My father passed away 3 years ago, and my mother last year. So my parents' house is too big for me to live in, and I decided to sell it to someone else. I don't have the house to give, Stephen. Huh? I'm not going to tell you where I live now, and even if I did, I wouldn't let you in, so don't come here. Don't ever come here. It was Stephen's turn to shout. What about my inheritance? When your parents die, the family home and the money should go to me, right? I frowned in anger at Stephen's words, who only tried to talk about my parents' death in calculating terms. From the looks of things, he must have been planning to steal not only my money, but also my parents' inheritance with an eagle eye, while saying something about relying on my parents' family. However, it was already too late to take the chance. I received all the money from my parents' inheritance along with my parents' house. Both my father and mother said they wouldn't leave a penny to a shameless man who eloped with their daughter-in-law. 10 years ago, on the day Stephen and I divorced, my parents were furious when they heard about Stephen and Sarah's betrayal from Michael and I. It was understandable for them to be angry. They had known Stephen and Sarah since before they were married and had been kind to Stephen as if he was their own son. They trusted him, but he had committed the worst betrayal of all. So the first thing my parents did before they died was to arrange their estate and prepare a will. My parents prepared a will so that everything, including the family home, would be inherited by me in case Sarah came back someday when she realized. 7 years later, my father passed away. My mother passed away last year, and I inherited the family home and estate. And although I did not want to give up my parents' house because it was too big for one person to live in, and because it still had memories of my parents, I decided to sell it, following their wishes. They hoped I would use it to house someone sensible rather than give it to people like Stephen and Sarah. When Stephen heard this, he exploded. "Don't play dumb with me, you bitch. Don't be silly. There's no way they'll forgive you for that." "I inherited the property by legal means," I said. "And there's no way they'll forgive me if I did this. I don't have to be dictated to by Stephen and Sarah, who did nothing and wandered around elsewhere as they pleased." Stephen, who had been doing nothing and wandering around, had no right to interfere with my life. I then stared down at my phone, which had been disconnected from the call. I had no idea that Stephen would abandon others for his own selfish reasons, come to me for help, and then lash out when he doesn't get his way. I had no idea that my ex-husband, with whom I had spent several years of my life, could be so lax and childish. Just as I was feeling my heart's deepest contempt, I received a phone call from Sarah as well. I didn't hear that my parents were dead even though they were my in-laws. She accused me of being so heartless as not to tell her. Sarah yelled at me, but she never touched my heart. If Sarah was truly shocked by the death of my parents, she should have said something like, "I want to offer a gift," or "I want to visit their grave sites." But she showed no sign of saying such a thing, and in her second sentence, it became apparent that she was only thinking about her inheritance, legacy, and money. That is why neither this woman nor Stephen deserved to sit in front of my parents' altar. Thinking this, I quietly rattled off a few choice words before Sarah could finish. Then later, I received a call from Michael. Mom, did my father and Sarah go over there? No, they didn't, but they called asking about my parents' house and their inheritance. Hearing my answer, Michael sighed on the other end of the phone. I see. I thought they may contact you since they came to my place the other day. Michael, are you all right? Did they do anything to you? I'm fine, Mom. Those guys just banged on my door and made a big fuss, and when I told them I was going to call the police, they simply ran away. But I have an idea. Michael shared his idea with me. Hearing this, I decided to break the karma cycle between Stephen and Sarah here, not only for myself, but also to protect my son, who was starting a new life. A few days after I carried out this idea, I received another phone call from Stephen, sounding terribly upset. Hey, Mary, did you do this too? You're not very talkative all of a sudden, are you? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, they're coming to our house right now. They? According to Stephen, 7 women are coming to the apartment where he and Sarah are living. These women are Stephen's unfaithful partners. He had been having affairs with 7 other young women in addition to Sarah. Sarah was unaware that Stephen was cheating on her with 7 other young women, and when the women started screaming, he became angry. He was upset by the fuss the women were making about it and is now taking his anger out on Sarah. I'm so surprised that there are 7 of them. I knew it was you. How in the world did you find out my secret? I wonder how, because I have nothing. My ex-husband left me 10 years ago for another woman. What? Stephen turned the tables on me over the phone and again hurled ear-splitting expletives at me, but that didn't bother me in the least. Eventually, Sarah, who was upset while we were on the phone, packed up and started a big fight with him, ignoring me on the other end of the line. I guess this is what they mean when they say things get out of hand. So I threw these last words to my ex-husband, though he may not have heard or understood them. So long, Stephen. Don't ever show up in front of me or our son again. Then I hung up the phone. In fact, the commotion caused by the women with whom he was having an affair was the idea that Michael had been talking about. After Stephen and Sarah broke into his house and he turned them away, he immediately hired a professional detective agency to find out more about them. It turned out that Stephen was cheating on Sarah here and there, and that led him to 7 other women. Moreover, he said that 3 of those 7 were married. Michael immediately informed me of this fact and even gave me Stephen and Sarah's current address and apartment, which the detective had also found out. So Michael and I told the 7 women where Stephen and Sarah were and sent them all there at once. I heard that the ensuing situation at Stephen and Sarah's apartment had caused such a fuss that the police had to be dispatched to the scene. Sarah, naturally, broke up with Stephen and he was simultaneously sued by 3 married husbands for alimony, the amount of which exceeded 3 figures. Stephen lost Sarah, his house, and his money. He is now living homeless and apart, and a colleague saw him participating in a soup kitchen. Sarah, on the other hand, like Stephen, was charged alimony in excess of 3 figures and was forced to borrow money to cover her expenses. But to her surprise, the source of the loan was a black market bank. Shortly after borrowing the money, she was suddenly taken away by scary-looking men in a car, and her whereabouts are unknown. After 10 years, I have made a final settlement with Stephen, and I am back to my peaceful life again. I am still single as ever, but as long as I can live a happy and lively life at school, that's enough for me. Later, Michael also met a woman with a child. They are now dating on the premise of marriage, and I sincerely hope that he too can find a new happiness and life.
It's been a while, hasn't it? What are you doing here all by yourself? As I turned around thinking I recognized the voice, my mother-in-law stood there. Oh, hello. You still haven't had a child? So, you are a defective wife that can't even show me a grandchild. And what's with not showing your face? How cheeky you are. I had lived peacefully for 8 years without seeing my mother-in-law. I wish I could not see her from now on. While thinking about such a thing, I made my stance clear to her. Well, my child is right over there. My name is Mirabelle. I'm a 44-year-old housewife. After graduating from college, I started working as a preschool teacher, spending my days immersed in work. The daycare was a place where lives were entrusted to us, so it carried a lot of responsibility and was tough, but the children's innocent smiles were incredibly healing. During these days filled with passion for my work, my friend introduced me to who would later become my husband, John. He was 25 at the time and worked hard as an elementary school teacher. Apparently, there are few opportunities for romantic encounters as teachers, and since he had been focused on studying to become a teacher during his student days, he doesn't have much experience with romance. Our meeting came about when he sought relationship advice from a friend. As educators who both worked with children, we had a lot in common and hit it off from the first time we met. We were supposed to meet with my friend and John at a cafe, but he got held up at work and was running late, my friend informed me. While waiting at the cafe with my friend, a man suddenly rushed in, breathless. "I'm so sorry, I'm late." "No problem at all. It's work, after all, can't be helped." Well. His reason for being late was that he got caught up talking about novels with the students. He was so engrossed in the conversation. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. And at the same time, I thought he was a teacher who really cares about his students. I was drawn to him in an instant. Anyone who forgets an appointment in favor of valuing conversations with students must be a person with a beautiful heart. "I'm sorry for laughing so much when we've just met. But it's a wonderful reason to be a teacher." No. It's me who should apologize for being late. And by an hour, no less. Please, don't mind about it. I was just sitting here, enjoying my coffee, and wanted to get to know you better. Really? Yes. Once I saw your smile, all my nervousness just flew away. That's good to hear. But I'm still a bit nervous. I didn't expect to be introduced to such an attractive woman. Really? John said, a bit embarrassed. I didn't expect him to say something like that. I'm 36, but you look quite young, John. I'm currently 29. You're young. That's a 7-year difference. No, the age gap doesn't matter. What matters is if we can respect each other. Even if we were closer in age, it wouldn't mean anything if that respect wasn't there. He really speaks his mind clearly. True to being a teacher, he knew how to make his point. But his thoughtfulness and consideration were evident, giving me the impression that he was a person of solid character. I found myself increasingly drawn to him, and we both wanted to meet up, just the two of us. He seemed interested in me as well, and we exchanged contact information and started dating. As we met up a few times, it became clear that John was passionate about his work, caring towards others, and, above all, a person who was trusted and respected by his students. John seemed to think highly of me too. Feeling that I would regret it if I didn't express my feelings, despite having met just before, I suggested we start dating with marriage in mind. He accepted, saying he had wanted to ask me out himself, and so we became a couple. About a year into our relationship, he proposed to me. Please let me say the words. Will you spend the rest of your future with me? With that, John handed me a ring. My heart had already decided. I believe I can have a happy marriage with you, John. I look forward to our future together. And so, we decided to get married. We smoothly handled the greetings with each of our parents, met with both families, and held our wedding ceremony. And then our life as newlyweds had just begun. Life with the man I love was filled with joy and happiness. As we planned our marriage, we had serious discussions about our careers and children. He is so wonderful that he respects my life view and passion for my career, and it's clear that he treats me greatly. Having been devoted to my job, I decided to continue working after marriage. We also hope to have children soon, but since that's a gift from above, it's not something we can control on our own, yet we hope and wait with optimism. Having had these thorough discussions as a couple, our married life has been happy with clear communication. Little did we know that dark clouds were looming over our peaceful life. At that time, we had no idea. I'm gonna head out to the bookstore. Looking for some books I can introduce to my students. I'll be back by dinner. Got it. Take care. On a certain holiday. After seeing John off, I was taking a breather in the living room when the doorbell rang. Hello, Mirabelle. Oh. Hello. What brings you here today? Where's John? John just stepped out. Oh, I see. My mother-in-law momentarily showed a look of disappointment but quickly turned to me and started this conversation. It's almost been a year since you got married, hasn't it? Yes, that's right. When are you planning to quit your job? I wasn't planning to quit. What are you talking about? You still don't have any children. What's the point of continuing to work? My mother-in-law said this, staring at me disapprovingly. Well. I was taken aback by such a sudden statement. You're already 36, you know? The age you can have children is limited. It seemed my mother-in-law was eager to press me about having grandchildren. But since childbirth isn't something that can be decided by will alone, I decided to be honest. Of course, I've talked about this with John, and we would love to have children if possible. But it's a blessing. If I get pregnant, I'll let you know right away. When I responded that way, she couldn't hide her impatience and pressed on, this is no time to be laid back. You can't just say someday. I was taken aback by her words and attitude, as she had seemed so calm when we met before we were married. I'm sorry, but this isn't a problem just about me. As I tried to apologize and explain, she got even angrier and barged into the house saying, so what? Is it John's fault? I didn't want her to enter without my permission. Then, from the living room, I heard her shout. What is this machine? I just hit my foot on it. I'm sorry. That's an air purifier. I'm really sensitive to house dust, and it makes me sneeze a lot. So I keep it to clean the air. After I hurriedly explained, she let out a deep sigh. See, that's your problem. You always have an excuse for everything. No, it's not about making excuses, it's just about my body. I think all these excuses are what make you weak. If you want fresh air, just open a window. Well, this apartment is on a busy street, so there's also the concern about exhaust fumes. That's exactly why you can't have kids, always worrying about things like that. My mother-in-law made everything about not being able to have children. And then, incredibly, she said this. You need to whip into shape. Come to my place next week. It's just me since my husband passed, so it won't be a bother. Make sure you come, all right? You know what will happen if you don't, right? It was just a threat. But, unable to dismiss it outright, I ended up visiting her house the next week. When she led me into the living room, a strange smell hit my nose. What's this smell? I asked and puzzled. Then she handed me a drink that looked like tea. If you drink this tea, it's supposed to help you get in good condition to conceive. So drink up. You're supposed to drink 4 cups a day. She said that, shoving a paper bag forcefully into my purse. What are you doing? Drink this tea at home too. It will help you get pregnant. I was dumbfounded by her presumptuous behavior. Later, when she took me out to the yard, I saw a mountain of laundry. What's with all this laundry? There seems to be a lot of children's clothes. These are from an acquaintance's kids. Touching and washing children's items can make it easier to conceive. It's also preparation for when you have kids, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. She said with a laugh, then brought out a large tub and a washboard. Remember, wash with passion. Then the baby will be happy to come to your womb. With that, she left me alone to go back to the living room. In other words, she was telling me to wash all of it. I was speechless, but if I didn't wash them, I risked more unreasonable demands or troubles. Reluctantly, I did as told and washed the children's clothes on the washboard before hanging them to dry. I've finished the laundry. Good. Then come over the day after tomorrow and do the laundry again, just like today. I have work the day after tomorrow. What? You can make time before or after work, can't you? If you really want children, you have to be willing to push yourself a bit. She kept pushing her demands on me. Or is it that you just don't have the determination? Feeling provoked, I decided to do as she said. After finishing my job at the daycare, I went straight to my mother-in-law's house and washed unknown children's laundry by hand in the dark. My hands were rough and chapped from washing in the chilly evening air. Mirabelle, what happened to your hands? John was surprised when he saw my hands. But I hesitated to tell the truth. It seemed like an outdated practice, but for John, she's an important family member, his mother. I carefully chose my words before speaking. Actually, your mom told me that washing children's clothes by hand makes it easier to conceive. So I've been going to her house every other day to do that. When I said that, John looked at me incredulously. Do you think that'll get us a child? I couldn't answer his question. And from my expression, John seemed to understand everything. I'll talk to Mom. You don't have to go anymore. Also, I'm gonna go to the doctor. Pregnancy isn't just a woman's issue, and there might be something on my end. Thank you. But don't push yourself too hard. What are you talking about? It's natural to do this much for Mirabelle. I almost cried at John's words. It's rare to find someone so supportive. But this certainly wouldn't satisfy his mother. Although John warned his mother and I no longer needed to go to her house. One day, a package from his mother arrived. Opening the cardboard box, I found old pregnancy and parenting books and a lengthy letter. The letter was filled with anger towards our actions. I felt bad emotions being treated this way. John, upon seeing it, openly showed his anger. After I said to stop, she's still doing this. He immediately called his mother. Mom is an important family member, but the most important person I should protect is my wife, Mirabelle. If interacting with Mom means hurting Mirabelle, then I need to rethink our relationship. Of course, I don't want to have regrets if something happens to Mom, so I won't cut ties. But we'll only keep minimal contact. That's all we need. John said this calmly yet firmly to his mother. After that, I no longer needed to interact with his mother. The pressure from her stopped, and we've been living peacefully. John prioritizes our life together, but he seems concerned about his mother living alone at home, and it appears he sends her a small amount of money every month. Regarding that, I have no right to complain. Thus, after some time without seeing my mother-in-law and living peaceful days, I found out I was pregnant. Tears of joy streamed down my face. Mirabelle, we did it! Thank you so much! Let's work hard together as parents from now on. Sharing the joy with my husband, we looked forward to our child's birth and spent happy days together. 8 years had passed. One day, I was leisurely enjoying a takeout coffee in the park. Then someone suddenly spoke to me from behind. It's been a while. What are you doing here all alone? Turning around, thinking I recognized the voice, there was my mother-in-law. Oh, hello! She looked at me with disdain and said, Haven't you had a child yet? So, you are still a defective wife that can't even show me a grandchild. Her arrogant attitude hadn't changed at all over the years, and her words soured the taste of the coffee I was enjoying. And what's with not showing your face? How cheeky you are. She continued to belittle me as usual, even making a snide comment about me drinking coffee in the park. Why don't you quit acting like an old lady and hurry up and have a child? Or just bravely leave John. I'll get him remarried to a younger woman and make sure he has children. I had lived peacefully for 8 years without seeing my mother-in-law. I wished I could continue not seeing her. Thinking this, I made my stance clear to her. Actually, our child is right over there. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law showed a moment of surprise, but then burst into laughter. What are you talking about? I can't believe such a lie. Besides, you're much older than John, right? There's no way you could have a child at your age. Indeed, I am older than John, but I couldn't let her assumption that I couldn't have children go unchallenged. In reality, there are many couples with age differences who have children, even at an older age. I took a deep breath, trying to put my thoughts into words, but my mother-in-law cut me off by raising her finger and glaring at me. That's enough. I seriously want you to leave John. Even after 8 years of estrangement, it seems my mother-in-law really hasn't changed. At that moment, a child, looking worried, looked at us from a distance and then ran over. I felt terribly guilty for involving the child in such a situation. Mom, are you okay? Who is this old lady? The child asked me. The girl who ran up to me is Sarah, my and John's daughter. I hesitated whether to tell Sarah the truth. The mother-in-law is her grandmother, and I wasn't sure if it was right to keep away from her because of my personal feelings. However, my mother-in-law believed that we really had a child when she saw Sarah calling me mom and approaching. She looked at Sarah with moved eyes. Then Sarah also stared at the mother-in-law. But then, with a startled look, she said, "Oh, that's the angry old lady from the convenience store." My mother-in-law ignored my daughter's comment and tried to reach out to her with trembling hands. But Sarah showed a puzzled expression and stepped back. Well, that's to be expected. For my daughter, a strange old woman was suddenly trying to touch her. I took my daughter's hand, protecting her from my mother-in-law, and asked her, "Sarah, do you always see this person at the convenience store?" "Yeah, I often buy snacks and juice there with my friends on the way to tennis club, and she's always yelling at the cashiers." My mother-in-law's face turned pale at my daughter's words. "Is that true?" "I don't know. It must be someone else." "It's not someone else. It's her. She's always shouting at the staff." I looked at my mother-in-law skeptically. She awkwardly averted her gaze. Surely, what my daughter said was true. Then, my husband arrived at the park. Sorry. I found an interesting novel at the bookstore and got delayed." "Wait, Mom? John, you had a grandchild, and why didn't you tell me?" My mother-in-law confronted him upon seeing him. However, my husband calmly retorted to his mother. "I said we're only doing the bare minimum of interaction, right? And I also told you not to contact Mirabelle, didn't I? So why are you here?" My mother-in-law was flustered by her son's cold words. "I just happened to see her in the park. But keeping the child a secret is terrible, isn't it? You knew how much I wanted a grandchild." "I haven't forgiven you for deeply hurting Mirabelle. You're important as a mother, but I don't want you involved in my family. I've drawn a line there." My mother-in-law's face turned pale at my husband's words. I felt truly lovely to my husband who stood up for me like that. Then I got back to the topic. About the incident that you're always yelling at the convenience store cashiers. It might cause trouble for my family, and it's just sad for the staff, so could you please stop? What's this about?" John also joined the conversation with a stern look. As I explained the situation, John's expression turned grim. "Mom, what are you doing? I'm embarrassed to have a mother who behaves like that. It's different. The staff at that convenience store just don't have proper training." "I can't believe what you're saying, Mom. We're going to the convenience store right now, and you're going to apologize." But..." My husband said this and forcibly took his mother to the convenience store. It's too much trouble for the shop with a large group, so my daughter and I stayed in the park. And after a few minutes, my husband returned with his mother. It was the worst. Mom was demanding a refund, claiming she was sold a defective product. "Is that true?" My mother-in-law looked down in shame and embarrassment. Are you having financial troubles?" When I asked her that, she suddenly looked up and began to cry desperately. "That's right. I can't make it on my own. John, Mirabelle, please lend me some money." Both my husband and I were surprised by my mother-in-law's sudden attitude. "Wait a minute, Mom. Haven't I been sending about $600 a month? That should cover food expenses if you're living alone." "That kind of money isn't enough for living. I need at least $2,000 a month in support." "No way, that's unreasonable." Then I remembered something. I recalled that my mother-in-law's house was filled with expensive brand items. "You had a lot of brand items, didn't you?" Are you still buying those things, even going into debt for them? My mother-in-law flinched at my words. Her reaction was incredibly telling. I see. You could buy those with Dad's inheritance before, but now you've run out and are in debt. That changes things. As a son, I'll continue to send $600 a month as support. But I won't help with the debt repayment. You'll have to cover that from your pension or by working. And please stop causing scenes at the convenience store. If you do it again, I've told the store manager they can call the police. Please, don't push me into a corner like this. You put yourself in this situation, Mom. Please be aware of that and reflect on it. We're going to leave now. With that, my husband took my hand and our daughters, and we started walking away. My mother-in-law slumped on the bench, looking like it was the end of the world for her. After that, we no longer saw my mother-in-law. Being spoken to like that by her own son must have shocked her. Later, we heard that she sold her house to pay off her debts and now lives alone in a small apartment, quietly. I just hope she doesn't get into debt or trouble again. Meanwhile, my daughter, husband, and I are enjoying peaceful and happy days. We want to live happily as a family and create many more memories together. Thank you for watching until the end. If you liked it, please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.